The blade skittered over my ear, just missing. My pulse was racing as I stood motionless and gazed at my mother-in-law, Patricia, who had a menacing smile and was wielding the cake knife like a weapon. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Isabel dear," she gurgled, sounding very kind. "I must have dropped my hand. Allow me to cut you a piece of cake right now." Stepping back, my hands trembled. "No, Patricia, thank you. I'm not hungry anymore." My husband, Jason, rushed to my side. "What the heck, Mom? You could have injured Isabel." Patricia's look changed to one of innocence. "Oh, Jason, please stop being so absurd. It happened by mistake. Do you not think, sweet Isabel, that I would never intentionally harm her?" I bit my tongue to contain my screams. This was supposed to be a happy family get-together to commemorate Jason's promotion, but Patricia had made it into something terrifying. I tugged at Jason's sleeve and murmured, "I think we should go." Teeth clenched, he nodded. "Yes, I believe that to be the best. We're heading out, Dad." The father of Jason, Thomas, glanced up from his plate, confused. "However, you haven't really touched your meal. Why the hurry?" Jason grabbed our jackets and snapped, "Ask your wife." Patricia's sugar-coated words followed us as we made our way toward the entrance. "Going so quickly? Jason, I cooked your favorite dessert. Do you not wish to stay?" Jason's dilemma was evident to me. He was conflicted since he loved me and his mother equally, despite her shortcomings. Finally, with a strained voice, he remarked, "We'll take some to go, Mom." Patricia faked a grin, with her eyes furrowed. "Obviously, my dear. I'll finish it up for you." I looked at Jason as she vanished into the kitchen. I said, "We can't keep doing this. Your mother is out of control." With a groan, he ran a hand over his hair. I am aware. However, what am I able to do? She's my mother." "She poses a threat," I shot back. "If we don't do something, she's going to ruin our marriage." Patricia reappeared with a Tupperware container before Jason could reply. "You're welcome, my dear." She gave Jason an extra-large piece and stated, "I made sure to give you an extra-large piece." Her stare met mine, and I could not help but notice the anger in her eyes. With a fake sweetness in her voice, she said, "Drive safe now, and please, Isabel, try to use extra caution while near sharp items. We would want no accidents." As we exited the home, a shiver went down my spine. I turned to Jason in the vehicle. "I assume you heard that? It wasn't simply me." With a groan, he turned on the engine. "I became aware of it. I'll speak with her, I promise. She will ultimately change her mind." I laughed heartily. "Yeah, right, and pigs might fly." I couldn't get rid of the sensation that this was only the beginning as we drove home in a tense quiet. Patricia had never liked me, but something felt different, more sinister tonight. Feeling suspicious, I took a quick look at the Tupperware container resting on my lap. "Jason, pull over." "What? Why?" "Just do it." When he obeyed, I exited the vehicle and opened the container. First, it was the fragrance, something odd and sharp. I gasped as I spilled the contents across the grass. "Jason, look at this." His eyes widened at the sight of the cake as he walked around the automobile. Something was infused into it, small white crystals that were unquestionably not sugar. With a murmur, "Oh my God, she wouldn't." Of course, we both knew the truth. There was no turning back now that Patricia had crossed a boundary. I knew our lives would never be the same as we stood there under the moonlight, looking at the contaminated cake. I was going to win this battle with Patricia, no matter what it took. I gazed at the photo album, running my fingertips along the borders of a 5-year-old snapshot. Besides Jason, I was grinning in my white dress, and Patricia stood just behind us, her smile as fragile as glass. "Penny for your thoughts?" I was shocked out of my trance by Jason's voice. I closed the album with a snap. I'm just thinking back to the day I met your mother. I was so innocent, God. With a groan, Jason took a seat next to me on the couch. Isabel, you could not have known. Not one of us did. However, I should have known. The warning indicators were present from the start. I closed my eyes and thought about that day, 5 years ago. I was going to his parents' place for supper with Jason, who had recently gotten engaged. I was anxious and wanted to come across well. Patricia had opened the door, and I felt so underdressed in my work attire next to her well-styled hair and clothing. Her gaze swept over me, questioningly. "You must be Isabel," she had remarked. "I thought you'd be taller." I shrugged it off at the time, calling it nervousness. But as the night went on, Patricia's jabs grew more pointed and cutting. Over dinner, she remarked, "So, Isabel, Jason tells me you're quite career-focused. You should definitely make time for your family. Ultimately, a woman's primary role is that of a mother." I had almost choked on my coffee. Trying not to laugh, I said, "Well, I believe a woman can have both a career and a family." Patricia squinted her eyes. "How modern of you." There was a noticeable tension in the space. Thomas, chagrined, attempted to shift the topic, but Patricia was not finished. With a tone full of contempt, she questioned, "And what exactly do your parents think of your ambitions?" I sat up straight and looked her in the eye. "My folks are pleased with me. They have consistently inspired me to pursue my goals." Patricia gave a whiff. "I see. Not everyone appreciates tradition these days." The recollection subsided, and I was back in the here and now. My chest boiled with anger. With a tense voice, I added, "She hated me from the beginning, Jason, and now she's trying to poison us. Literally." With a mask of agony on his face, Jason ran a hand through his hair. "I know. However, what are our options?" Raiding about the room, I got up. "We need to address her and make her understand that her behavior is inappropriate." My phone buzzed just then. The text message said, "Avoid my son, you gold-digging harlot, or else." It came from an unidentified number. I watched Jason's face lose color as I read him the message. He murmured, "This has gone too far," and took out his own phone. "I'm calling her right now." Jason was calling his mother, and suddenly the doorbell rang. We glanced at each other warily. I said, "I'll get it," and headed for the door. When I opened it, I saw Patricia standing there with a casserole dish in her hands and a corny smile on her face. Her response was, "Surprise. I intended to stop over and bring a small homemade dinner. You two undoubtedly don't have time for healthy eating because you are both so busy with your work." My head whirling, I stood still. I heard Jason's voice rising behind me as he got into a heated phone argument with someone. Patricia squinted her eyes. "Aren't you going to invite me in, dear?" I took a deep breath, my heart racing. "Patricia, I don't think—" "Mom!" Behind me, with a mixture of feelings on his face, was Jason. "What are you doing here?" Patricia never faltered in her smile. "I'm just dropping off a small gift for my couple. Will you please allow me in?" My stomach turned as I looked at the casserole dish and thought of the spoiled cake. "Patricia, let's talk about boundaries, respect, and your recent behavior," I finally managed to say. Patricia smiled, brighter and more terrifying than ever, but then her grin wavered for a second. "Oh, Isabel," she pushed by me and inside the house with a purr. "I think it's high time we had a little chat." Jason glanced at me as the door shut behind her. We exchanged a glance that made it obvious that this encounter was long overdue and that it would finish unpredictably. I never imagined that I would detest opening my mailbox, yet here I was, my heart racing, reaching for the pile of envelopes containing bills and junk mail, and there it was, another pink letter that smelled strongly of Patricia's overpowering perfume. My hands shaking, I ripped it open. An adorable card with kittens on the front was inside. My blood ran cold when I read the letter inside. "Tick-tock, sweetheart. The biological clock on you is ticking away. Jason is worthy of a true family." I crushed the card, a wave of rage building inside me. This week there have been 3. Patricia waged a persistent campaign of psychological warfare. Rushing back to the house, I almost ran into Mrs. Robinson, our neighbor. "Oh, Isabel," she said, her gaze getting narrower. "I was just coming to see you." I feigned a laugh. "Hello, Mrs. Robinson. How may I assist you?" Her lips were pursed. "Well, I saw that poor Patricia has been taking care of your garden recently, and that's not good. Considering her health concerns, it's really kind of her." Puzzled, I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Mrs. Robinson gave Tuttle. "Don't act foolish, my love. Patricia informed us about your mistreatment of her, including your refusal to assist with her medical visits, and your disregard for her calls. It truly is dishonorable." My mouth fell open. "That is just untrue. Patricia was—" "Please stop making excuses," Mrs. Robinson interrupted. "We're all aware of reality. You're too preoccupied with your work to be concerned about your family. It makes sense why you haven't yet given birth." I was left astonished and humiliated in my own doorway as she pivoted on her heel and strode off. Jason was at the kitchen table, his head in his hands, as I went inside. "Jason," I said, "what's wrong?" He looked up, the rims of his eyes crimson. "My supervisor gave me a call. It appears that anonymous emails accusing me of being unstable and unsuited for my job have been sent to the corporation. They're thinking about releasing me." My heart fell. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Do you have any thoughts?" He gave a somber nod. "She must be the culprit. Who else would take such action?" I collapsed onto the chair next to him, my head spinning. "Jason, she is ruining our life. My neighbors believe I'm not taking care of her. Her goal is to have you fired. What comes next?" Jason extended his hand to grasp my hand. "We must face her together. This needs to end." My phone buzzed just then. The SMS came from an unidentified number. "My dear, check your email. Something intriguing could catch your eye." I felt a wave of fear when I checked my inbox. The HR department of my firm had left a statement there, bolded, "Regarding your resignation." "No," I said in a broken voice. "She didn't." Jason's expression darkened as he peeked over my shoulder. "She pretended to be resigning. That's all. Let's get over there immediately." The door sprang open as we reached for it with our keys. Patricia was standing there, a worried mask on her face. She sobbed, "Oh, my dears, I came as soon as I heard. That kind of job loss, Isabel, and the awful stories Jason was hearing at work. You poor things had to be sorrowful." I glared at her, fury immobilizing me. She was the source of all this suffering, so how could she just stand there acting like she didn't care? Jason moved nearer, speaking in a menacing yet quiet tone. "Mom, stop the behavior. We are aware of your actions." Patricia's pretentious eyes became wide. "My dear, what are you talking about? I'm only here to assist." "Help?" I lost it. "You refer to this as assistance? You have been attempting to destroy our life." Patricia briefly showed signs of weakness, with a glint of anger in her gaze. "I just have my son's best interests in mind. He is deserving of greater than you." There was a noticeable tension in the space. Torn between the woman he loved and his mother, who reared him, Jason stood between us. "Enough," he eventually murmured. "This is now over. We are going to have a discussion and resolve this issue once and for all." There were a lot of unsaid charges in the air as we made our way to the living room. I had a persistent sensation that everything would alter as a result of this encounter. After today, our family will never be the same, for better or worse. I was standing in the corner of Patricia and Thomas's living room, gripping my glass of wine like it was my lifeline, as the mocking lights of the Christmas tree twinkled. It was only the beginning of the yearly family get-together, but I immediately felt like I was being choked. "More drink, anyone?" Patricia's fake smile broke through when she spoke in a sugar-coated tone, and her eyes glowed like a predator. "Isabel, please stop drinking. You can't possibly be expecting?" All of the looks, especially Jason's, weighed on me as the room went silent. Patricia enjoyed poking fun at us since we had been trying for a baby for months without any luck. "No, Patricia," I responded in a tense voice. "Just watching my alcohol intake." "What a shame. You are aware that every month matters at your age. Like they say, tick-tock." I noticed Jason tighten, about to step in, but I gave a small shake of my head. No way was I going to fall for her bait today. The more the evening went on, the harsher and more frequent Patricia's jabs got. She told the family tales of Jason's early years, stating that she had given up her job to raise him. She stared at me and added, "Of course, some women prefer their jobs over family. I suppose that's why some fail to become mothers." And that was all. My glass shattered and the wine spilled over the edge. "Patricia, enough already. Simply express your true feelings." Dead silence fell over the room. Patricia's pretentious eyes became wide. "What do you mean, Isabel? You believe that I'm a bad wife because I work and haven't yet given you grandkids. Guess what, though? My capacity to have children doesn't define my value." Patricia's facade fell, exposing the resentment behind her. "No, your worth is defined by how you treat family, and you, my dear, are sorely lacking," Jason interrupted. "Mom." But Patricia was in a mood. She growled, "You've destroyed this family with your self-centered work goals and your failure to provide Jason with children. He is worthy of better." I had a slap-like feeling. My eyes pinched with tears as I surveyed the space. As usual, Thomas avoided confrontation by focusing on his feet. While his cousins were whispering among themselves, Jason remained still and still. I'd never felt more alone than I did at that moment. "You want to know why we don't have kids yet, Patricia?" I spoke, sounding shaky. "Because every physician we've visited has told us that stress in our life is interfering with our ability to become parents. And you are aware of what the main cause of that tension is? You." Shouts of surprise filled the room. Patricia's cheeks became a frightening shade of scarlet. She screamed, "How dare you blame me for your shortcomings? Jason, are you going to let her speak to me like this?" Everybody's gaze was fixed on Jason. Now was the time when he had to decide between his mother and his bride. However, Jason said nothing, a mask of agony covering his face, and all the information I required was audible in his quiet. I said, "Merry Christmas, everyone," and grabbed my coat. "I think it's best if I go." I heard footsteps following me as I ventured outside into the chilly night air. Half expecting to see Jason, I turned to see Thomas. "Isabel, please wait," he urged. "I really apologize for what Patricia said. It wasn't appropriate." I gave a sorrowful grin. "But Thomas, you didn't stop her, did you? None of you ever do." With a look of guilt on his face, he glanced aside. "You're right, and that needs to change." Tears were flowing down my face as I drove home alone and knew something had to give. Living torn between the poisonous household Jason came from and my love for him, I could not continue this way. It was time to decide what to do. I knew precisely what I had to do when the Christmas lights in my rearview mirror went out. Seated on the couch in our living room, I gazed at the packed bag beside the door. Jason still hadn't returned home 3 days after the Christmas incident. He texted me again, and this time it buzzed. "I'm sorry. I require further time." Extra time for what purposes? To decide between his mother and his wife? I felt my stomach turn at the prospect. I was startled by a knock at the door. Half expecting to see Jason, I opened it. Rather, I was standing face to face with Thomas. "Isabel," he continued, seeming worried, "may I come in?" I moved aside after nodding. Thomas came in and looked at my baggage. "You're leaving?" he said, his tone showing worry. I shook my head, trying not to cry. "I'm not sure. Perhaps. Thomas, I can't continue to live this way." He sank into an armchair with a groan. "I'm here because I understand, that's why. It's time to discuss Patricia." My heart pounded. Was this an ambush of sorts? But what Thomas said next completely stunned me. "Isabel, I'm leaving her. I submitted a divorce petition." I stared at him in shock, not knowing how to take in this knowledge. "What? Why now?" Thomas looked up at me, resolve and regret in his eyes. "Because I've spent far too much time being a coward. The last straw was what Patricia did over Christmas. I've been supporting her actions for years, but this time it's over." Taken from his pocket, he produced a little notepad. "I've been monitoring Patricia's episodes, all of the deception, manipulation, and falsehoods. I reasoned that perhaps if I wrote it down, I would have the confidence to speak with her. Up until today, I never did." I felt both relief and fear as Thomas turned the pages, narrating incident after occurrence. Patricia was more poisonous than I could have ever imagined. "Does Jason know?" My question was hardly audible above a whisper. Thomas gave a headshake. "Not just yet. I wanted to let you know first, to say I'm sorry for not defending you sooner, and to beg for your help." "My help?" "Indeed, Isabel. Jason is having trouble. Patricia is digging in her heels. He needs the truth to be shown to him by both of us." My phone buzzed again just then. Jason texted me again, saying, "I'm heading home. We must have a conversation." Heart thumping, I showed Thomas the message. "He's on his way." Thomas had a determined look on his face. "All right, we need to deal with this as a true family, now." I had an odd mixture of worry and optimism as we waited for Jason. Could this be the pivotal moment we require? We both turned at the sound of a key in the lock. When Jason saw his father, his eyes widened and he entered. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Jason inquired. Thomas moved ahead and touched Jason's shoulder. "Son, we need to talk about your mother." Jason became stern-faced. "If you're here to stand up for her—" "No," Thomas cut in. "I'm here to be honest with you. Everything." Thomas revealed everything for the next hour, including years of deceit, manipulation, and poisonous conduct. With a flurry of emotions on his face, Jason listened in startled silence. When Thomas was done, Jason turned to face me, tears welling up in his eyes. "I'm very sorry, Isabel. I didn't realize it was that nasty." I grasped his hand and gave it a little squeeze. "Jason, it's not your fault. But this cannot continue. We must decide what to do." With renewed conviction in his eyes, Jason nodded. "You're accurate. You two are alike. Together, it's time for us to confront Mom." I felt a flicker of optimism as the three of us sat there, figuring out what to do next. I didn't feel alone in my battle for the first time in years, even though the path ahead would be difficult. Thomas cleared his throat. "One more thing that each of you needs to know. I have chosen to separate from Patricia." The weight of his remarks struck home, and the room became quiet. This was it, the irreversible point. The events that followed would permanently alter our family. I saw in Jason's eyes the same mixture of resolve and terror that I was experiencing. We stood at a fork in the road, and our decision would determine how we would go. "So," I continued, maintaining a steady tone despite my heart pounding, "what should we do now?" The courthouse loomed before us, a monolithic symbol of the battle we were about to face. Thomas looked determined yet nervous as he held the divorce papers. His fingers trembled. Jason positioned himself next to him, his jaw clenched, and I lingered close by, my heart racing. "Dad, are you sure about this?" Jason questioned quietly. Thomas nodded, his eyes steely. "Son, it's time. Her poisoning must stop destroying our lives." We were climbing the stairs when we heard a voice we knew. Patricia exclaimed, "Well, well, what a heartfelt family outing," with a twisted smile on her lips. As usual, she was immaculately dressed, but something about the wild expression in her eyes made my skin crawl. Jason said, "Mom," but Patricia cut him off with a snide gesture. She angrily said, "Save it. I recognize this as a plot by members of my own family against me." Thomas moved forward, speaking in a cool, collected tone. "This isn't a plot, Patricia. It is the outcome of what you did. To file for divorce, we are here." Patricia's angry face contorted. "Divorce? I'm not up for divorce. You've stolen just as much from us as I have given you. My youth, my hopes, my life." I was surprised to find that I was speaking up. "You've taken from us too," I said in a firm voice. Patricia met my gaze, her eyes blazing with rage. "You," she spit out. "All of this is your fault. You've made them dislike me." Patricia sprang at me, her well-groomed nails raking my face before I could even blink. Startled by the unexpected assault, I stumbled backward. She resisted and shouted until Jason interfered and pushed her away. "Leave me," shouted Patricia. "You've destroyed our family and our lives. Everything." Before long, security agents arrived and dragged Patricia away. She glanced back, her face contorted with anger as she was led out. "This isn't finished," she growled. "I'll see to it that everyone pays for this betrayal." We sat in startled silence inside the courthouse, waiting for our time to file the paperwork. The stinging reminder of the emotional wounds Patricia had inflicted over the years was the burn of her scratches on my face. With a delicate palm on my face, Jason replied, "Isabel, I'm so sorry. I never thought she would... My goodness, what have we done?" I took hold of his hand and squeezed it to comfort him. "Jason, we're making the correct decision. Though difficult, it's essential." Pale-looking Thomas nodded. "Years ago is when I should have done this. Then perhaps..." Though his voice faltered, the implication was evident. If things hadn't gotten so awful, maybe we could have kept our family functioning more like a typical one. As we waited, my phone buzzed continuously with messages from friends, neighbors, and colleagues. Patricia quickly spread her version of events, claiming that Thomas had committed and was trying to steal his assets and ruin his reputation. I read through the messages, shaking my head. "Of course she's doing this," I said. "It's always been about control with Patricia. If she can't have it, she'll destroy everything." At that moment, Jason's phone rang. He answered, his face growing increasingly pale with each passing second. With his phone mouthpiece covered, Jason said, "It's my boss. Patricia has called the company to tell them she needs to take a leave of absence due to a mental breakdown." Our lives, jobs, and reputations were on the line, and I could feel the walls closing in as Patricia's deceit and manipulation threatened to destroy all we had fought so hard to achieve. I looked at Thomas, and then back at Jason as he battled with his supervisor, attempting to explain the problem. Whether Patricia would go to any lengths to get retribution, or, more significantly, how we might stop her before she destroyed all we valued, was a question that both of us questioned. Our names were called by the court clerk, bringing us back to the present. This was an irreversible moment. I couldn't get rid of the sensation that this was just the beginning of a fight we might not be prepared to fight as we stood to follow her into the judge's chambers. Thomas's divorce petition had an impact on our lives, akin to a hurricane roaring through it. Patricia's poisonous falsehoods caused havoc in their wake as they swept across the neighborhood like wildfire. I watched from the front porch, avoiding eye contact, as yet another neighbor sped by. The loneliness was unbearable. Thomas's voice screamed out from within. "Margaret, you need to see this." Thomas and Jason were gathered over a laptop as I dashed back inside. The screen displayed a neighborhood forum that was rife with comments about us. With a shaky voice, Jason added, "She's telling everyone I'm abusive, that we're after his money, and that I've been pressuring Dad into getting a divorce." Something moved under my feet. "This is really crazy. We must take action." Thomas gave a firm nod, his eyes shining. Thomas said, "I've been making some calls. It's time we fought back." Thomas poured himself into the battle for the following several days with an intensity I had never seen before. He went to the neighbors and showed them the notebook he had kept track of Patricia's misdeeds. I was astounded to see him change from the quiet man I'd known into a resolute defender of the truth. But Patricia was not about to give up lightly. Her methods became more aggressive as Thomas gained ground with the neighbors. She was everywhere, in the park, the grocery store, even outside my workplace, acting out the part of the vulnerable, victimized lady. Mrs. Robinson cornered me at the drugstore one day. "Have you seen her?" With sorrow in her voice, Mrs. Robinson remarked, "Poor thing could hardly walk. Are you certain you're not treating her too harshly?" I found it difficult to control my frustration. "Mrs. Robinson, this is all a performance. Patricia," she interrupted me, "let's not say things we might regret, even though I know you're going through a difficult time." I could feel the walls closing in as she left. How could we defeat an adversary who wielded sympathy? The answer was not what was expected. Thomas's phone chimed one evening while we were planning over the dinner table. Thomas remarked, his tone growing serious, "It's Dr. Carlos." We stood silently and listened to him talk to the doctor. His face was a mixture of elation and contempt when he hung up. He disclosed, "Patricia has been fabricating her health issues. Dr. Carlos is willing to testify that she is in good physical health, but she has been suspicious for some time." This was the much-needed breakthrough. Armed with this knowledge, we went on the offensive. After Thomas exposed Patricia's duplicity to the local media, Jason contacted his employer with Dr. Carlos's testimony. The tide started to change slowly. Patricia's web of falsehoods started to come apart as neighbors who had grown apart sought to apologize and offer assistance. But tragedy occurred just when we thought things were getting better. When I woke up one morning, news vans and reporters had taken over our front yard. "I need to watch this on TV," Jason called from the living room. Patricia emerged onto the screen, her face marred by weeping, encircled by an ocean of microphones. She sobbed, "My own family has turned against me just because I dared to expose their manipulation and greed." Sensationally, the reporters nodded, and I felt a twinge of hopelessness. Patricia had brought her play to a broad audience. A sensation of desperation overcame me as reporters kept ringing the doorbell, demanding our side of the story. Our personal family problems had turned into a public show, and Patricia was playing the victim very well. Jason turned to face me, appearing pale, and said, "What do we do now?" I looked at Thomas and him, and they both were more dejected than I had ever seen. We had to choose at this crucial juncture whether to give in to the pressure or resist. I straightened my shoulders, took a deep breath, and spoke, more firmly than I felt. "We tell our story. No more hiding, no more shame. It's time for everyone to learn the truth about Patricia." I prayed in silence that we were making the correct choice as I got ready to face the media circus outside. Should we fail, we would be giving Patricia precisely what she desired: total destruction. As Patricia entered the stand in the courtroom, her visage reduced to a practiced look of anguish, hush fell over the room. With my heart pounding, I tightly gripped Jason's hand. "Mrs. Thompson, could you explain why you've been spreading false information about your family?" said our lawyer. Patricia said, "I've only ever told the truth," her eyes welling with tears. "My family has deserted me, leaving me to bear the pain on my own." I had a wave of rage, but before I could respond, our attorney produced a well-known notebook with Thomas's exact notes about Patricia's actions. "Your Honor, I would like to submit proof of Mrs. Thompson's long history of dishonesty and manipulation." I watched Patricia's mask come off as our lawyer went over the damaging passages. Her gaze flashed across the courtroom, looking for pity, but there was none to be seen. Dr. Carlos's testimony was next. He explained coolly how Patricia had made up her health problems to win her family's sympathy and acquire power over them. "It is my professional opinion that Mrs. Thompson is in excellent health," Dr. Carlos said. "Her allegations of a crippling sickness are wholly untrue." As Patricia's facade finally broke and her face contorted with wrath, a murmur sounds around the courtroom. She pointed at us and said, "You ungrateful wretches, after all that I have done for you." I felt the weight of security's restraint go from me. Patricia was no longer able to conceal the reality behind her falsehoods. The court made a swift and firm decision, ordering Patricia to stop communicating with us and completing Thomas's divorce. A mass of media met us as we emerged from the courthouse. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, what is your opinion regarding the verdict?" said one. I noticed our mingled emotions of relief and grief in Jason and Thomas's eyes. "We're glad that the truth has surfaced," I remarked as I took a deep breath and moved on. "More significantly, we hope that this will allow our family to move on and heal." Week by week, everything started to get back to normal. Previously cautious neighbors, they now gave us a warm welcome. Jason was greeted with wide arms upon his return by his company, who were happy with the court's decision. The biggest surprise, though, arrived on a calm Sunday morning. I was sitting at the breakfast table with Jason when all of a sudden I started feeling sick. "Isabel, are you all right?" Jason questioned, his voice full of anxiety. I realized as I glanced up at him, and a grin began to appear on my face. "I think I might be pregnant, Jason." There are no words to describe the happiness that day in our home. Thomas started crying with happiness when we told him the news. He gave us each a hug and stated, "Life finds a way." Even in the depths of darkness, we had discovered hope. As I stood there surrounded by my family's affection, I realized something profound. Although traumatic, the experience with Patricia had strengthened us. Together, we braved the storm and came out bruised but unscathed. A few months later, with Jason and Thomas at my side, as I cradled our baby daughter, I experienced a calmness I had never experienced before. Not only had we overcome Patricia's poisonous influence, but we had also triumphed over the uncertainty and worry that had previously dogged us. I planted a kiss on her forehead and muttered, "Welcome to the world, little one. You come from a family that genuinely values loyalty and love." Jason put his hand on my shoulder, and his eyes glistened with love and pride. "We've gone a long way," he muttered. Thomas touched his granddaughter's cheek tenderly and nodded. "And there is a lot for us to be excited about." I silently promised my daughter that she would grow up with love and support instead of the toxic influences that almost tore us apart as I stared at her innocent face. As a result of ending the cycle, we had given her the most precious gift of all, a family based on mutual respect, trust, and unconditional love. Even while I knew we could overcome anything as long as we stood together, I knew the path ahead wouldn't always be simple. Now that the storm had passed, we could at last look